Chimeir is a distant planet. It is defined by waves of life brought from Earth and set free to evolve independently in this new context. The indigenous life of the planet, swarms of microbes called magic by the people who live there, are what harvest Earth organisms and make copies on Chimeir. As the asteroid which concluded the Mesozoic never struck Chimeir, dinosaurs remain the dominant terrestrial megafauna.
Pakardia is a massive island in the southeast corner of the known world. Its people are welcoming to hosts at times, but protective of their home and often seen as reclusive. While they are on perhaps the best terms with the assembly out of any Chimeran faction, the reincarnation cycle of their religion demands the dead be returned to the island's soil, so they are reluctant to let specimens leave the island for study. This means there's difficulty in peer review and verification of statements made during fieldwork, and has resulted in a lot of uncertainty and misconceptions about the island's native flora and fauna. This month, we will meet 4 species endemic to Pakardia and its immediate neighboring islands. $1.5 million years ago, calamity came to Pakardia. As the axial tilt of the planet dramatically reduced, the cold latitudes of Chimeir got colder and the warmer regions got hotter. This made Pakardia quite cool, and the resulting extinctions contributed to the triggering of a harvest. To make matters worse, the low sea levels, as the increasingly colder polar region trapped ice, and passage from the mainland to Pakardia through Kadan became suddenly quite viable. This tilt and its consequences didn't last long, but the influx of mainland and harvested fauna devastated the local ecology of Pakardia. Fossil surveys of Pakardia's prehistory are few and far between, but it paints a picture of staggering turnover. There are many species of endemic megafauna, or animals over 50 kilos, on Pakardia, but only a few can claim ancestry prior to this major interchange. Some swam earlier, like the simimorph sloths and many animals which are now extinct, but most megafauna seem to have arrived 1.5 million years ago. When the Assembly discuss Pakardia's native fauna, they mean those who inhabited the island prior to these first migrants and harvested animals. While there are many small animals befitting this native description, only a few megafauna qualify. Ceratosaurs once ruled in Icare. A few Noasaurs represent the last ceratosaurs in the known world, and for the most part, they are small predators competing for scraps amidst the stacked niches occupied by big cats, hyenas, and cockatrice dromaeosaurs. The Arvalith lindworm is the largest mainland species. At up to 4 meters and 150 kilos, though usually a bit smaller, it's no pushover, but it is a shadow of their former glory. On Pakardia, this lineage found new opportunity and quickly grew large once more. The Weochetu'ka is, second after the Megaraptoran Oritaku, Pakardia's largest predator. They are large, armored, and have powerful jaws capable of breaking bone. Worst of all, they are social predators. While the Oritaku is considered Pakardia's apex predator, Weochetu'ka aren't much smaller. The largest females can reach 2 tons, comparable to an average male Oritaku, though they are substantially shorter than these towering competitors. Male Weochetu'ka, called Raharak for their guttural calls, are smaller than the females. Perhaps the most striking feature of these Noasaurs is their lack of arms. Males barely have a joint to support their large claw, while most female arms are entirely within their bodies. Males employ these arms in mating, and nothing more. It is for this feature that they were originally called the Pakardian lindworm by Reverend Hodges Burke, and this is sometimes preferred as its scientific name, though as this genus was first formally assigned to the crescent lindworm and they have since been separated into distinct genera, Mustela is more commonly favored as a formal genus for the Weochetu'ka. However, lindworm or lindvermis remains a popular informal name for this and their Arvelith cousin. The ceratosaurs have numerous adaptations to seek burrowing prey. While this suite of adaptations presumably evolved to hunt burrowing thescelosaurs in Nicar, it translated well once Chimeir became inundated with burrowing sloths, thereby permitting them to grow larger. By the anchored period, this genus had numerous species throughout both continents. The end of the anchored period, however, was unkind to this genus. Presumably, a Kadjarth population made their way south and across the lowered sea levels 1.5 million years ago to reach Pakardia. Today, this genus is only known from a few scattered populations throughout Arvel and western Nicar, and, of course, the robust population in Pakardia. The source of this extinction is unknown, presumably a consequence of climate change and new mammal competition acting as a death knell. In Nicar, for example, their endangerment and extinction paved the way for Thylacoleo to speciate into its modern diversity as sloth specialists. For all these challenges, they are still quite abundant in Pakardia, especially the highlands. They have short legs. This can make them somewhat inefficient at traveling, although they are surprisingly fast. Though not as hollow as the Oritaku, their skeletons are quite lightly built and bodies excavated with air sacs, meaning that they have far greater speed and endurance than first glance would make one suppose. They are also quite capable swimmers, though being so lightly built means they can sometimes struggle to remain submerged, but it's often enough to dive in, grab prey, and float back up with their prize. Enormous leg and tail muscles drive this unexpected mobility. They are ambush predators by specialty. Being so low-slung means they can often slink through a thicket of ferns and cycads undetected to set up an attack. While they are slow to turn, their sprint can often outpace the initial burst of many herbivores, especially the slower mastodon, toxodon, sloth, and thescelosaurs that are their favored game. They will sometimes go after moose and anamotu, but the former's speed and latter's agility means it's often difficult for them to reliably catch and kill. The giant gibbon is also a reliable source of food when found. When they do reach prey, the Weochetu'ka likes to establish a bite, then become dead weight. The front teeth form a hook that is good at grabbing, while their rear teeth have drawn comparison to those of tyrannosaurs, being thick and serrated to both crush and cut. Their jaws are extremely powerful, yet have a few points of cranial kinesis that lets them roll with abuse, able to clamp and hold with force rivaling that of a crocodile. Prey struggles, but the motion only causes their teeth to rend flesh and fracture bone. Their neck is long and flexible, and ribcage reinforced with thick armor, so retaliation is often inefficient. Once prey is exhausted, they begin removing portions. If the prey is small enough, they favor swallowing whole, which they can manage with surprising efficiency as their mandibles flex out with their opening. This contributed to perhaps their most gruesome behavior. They are man-eaters. Humans are the right size to swallow whole, but our broad shoulders inhibit this act. Because of this, experienced man-eaters remove the arms of humans they've learned to hunt to more efficiently swallow whole. In the folklore of the Picardiant, this is seen as an act of jealousy, as they lost their arms due to trickery of Indurkai. They were supposed to have impressive arms, but the trickster firebirds stole their arms for humans, so the theropods are ever trying to get them back. Since they lack arms to reattach human arms after removal, Weochetu'ka can only eat them in a futile effort to make them grow back within their own bodies. Weochetu'ka have a short incubation, only 10 weeks to the 6 months that their competing Megaraptorans require. Perhaps because Pakardia has a mild season and only a briefly dry winter, Weochetu'ka nests can happen at almost any time of the year, although their peak mating season is just as winter comes to a close. Dominant females can lay 2 to 3 clutches in a year. A large, healthy female could lay as many as 20 eggs, though 5 to a dozen is more common. While subordinate females must sometimes raise their own clutches, usually this is the task of the male. Males, usually a few related individuals, will share a larger dominant mate. All will mate with her when she is ready, and her clutch will presumably include at least a few eggs sired by each. The males watch the nest in rotation, with 1 or 2 guarding at all times, while the others sleep, patrol, or hunt with their mate. This attentive care, and their most vulnerable stage of life, is generally assumed to be how this animal survived when the abundance of nest raiders in Chimeir is so high, especially on an island like Picardia with numerous recent mustelid, cat, and canid species. Once the young hatch, however, parental care is not so diligent. Yes, often young remain near the nest for a few years, and this passive protection is beneficial against mammal predators and the Indrikai that seek to eliminate them as threats. But once they near maturity at 3 years or so, neither parent wants them around and they are driven off. It rarely comes to this, as usually they want to establish their own territory long beforehand. The feathering of adults is not visible at a distance. Up close, it looks like sparse bristles between scales. However, for their first year or two, young will be covered in a fairly dense, oily coat that protects them from rain and cold. As longtime viewers of the channel are no doubt aware, this animal has undergone numerous design changes. I haven't even gone public with a vast majority of their earlier designs. It could take a long time to land on a design that really clicks. I got pretty close with their design in the Firebirds episode, but I wasn't quite satisfied with their armor. Now, I am. The Indrikai is Pakardia's proud trickster, and the Orotaku its composed monarch. For the Weochetu'ka, I want to evoke not only very old reptilian dinosaur reconstructions, I also like the idea of them calling to mind a slinking dragon. With this latest design, I feel I've finally hit that mark. Cheers to David for sponsoring this series. We had originally planned a large episode on the Jurassic Islands, focusing on fauna I was going to have in a story in the next anthology, but as that story was moved to a later book, doing a showcase on 4 Pakardian dinosaurs was his next suggestion, and I was elated to run with it. In this series, we will learn more about the urek and the watipetun, or turtle pig, 2 animals descended from ancestors which have been in Pakardia since it was connected to the polar continent, and 2 fairly recent migrants, the Weochetu'ka and jurazhent. We'd originally planned the Orotaku to get an episode, but since they're getting a ballad in a couple years, I decided to instead give the highlight to the watipetun, which I'm very grateful for. Thanks again to David, to my Patreon patrons for your support, and thank you for watching. Cheers, folks!